My name is Helen Gibson, and I am in the city planning department. My title is Neighborhood Revitalization Coordinator, and I work with the Community Redevelopment Agency. The Belmont de Villiers neighborhood does fall within the city's CRA, so that is why it is a part of our focus. I invite everyone, please, to find a seat, move up. This is going to be a very informal type of a workshop, more of a conversation, I would hope. And if there's not a chair, just bring one up. But there are a few vacant here, and there's some room around the table. We can kind of cuddle and huddle. Back in 2004, the CRA, I was not with the CRA at that time, but I was around. The CRA engaged HHI consultants to work with the Belmont de Villiers neighborhood and the stakeholders to do some future land use planning for the district, for the area, for the neighborhood, based on the vision of the stakeholders. And many of you, or some of you, may have participated in those numerous workshops that were conducted. Out of that came a plan, and if you'll hold that up for me, the Belmont de Villiers land use plan, neighborhood land use plan, was developed. And that included several options actually, there were three that were identified for future land use. The maps to my left are directly from this plan and represent two of the future land use concepts that were put forth in the plan. The plan was approved by the neighborhood residents. The plan was adopted by the CRA and City Council. Then in 2011, we made our comprehensive plan update, and that establishes land use, and it establishes zoning and goals for development of the city. So as a part of that update, of course, we looked to the adopted plans to implement the changes recommended by those plans. Typically, the zoning will follow very closely on the heels of changes to the future land use plan. However, in this case, we had a change of government in the interim and many other changes, and so there was a lag between the future land use changes and the zoning changes. So in the past year, planning staff has begun to because there were changes made throughout the city, but they've begun to take area by area the zoning changes and begin to match them to the future land use changes that were adopted in 2011. As we went to do the future land use changes and the zoning changes for Belmont, apparently there had been some miscommunication. Apparently there was a desire for some final tweaking by the neighborhood of the future land use that was recommended, and apparently that was not conveyed. So today what we're doing is we're working together with you, with the neighborhood, to provide the proper zoning to achieve the collective vision. What we're doing today is basically a very informal conversation to hopefully get your direction as to what you would actually like to see. That we're totally at this point working to provide the neighborhood with what will achieve its vision. And hopefully from today there will be a consensus on that. We felt we had a consensus, and actually this is one of the, I think this was the version, this was concept A from the land use plan, and it called for one major commercial core. This blue is basically a commercial, the consultant called it a neighborhood commercial cultural center, but basically that would retain the commercial zoning of the core 4 blocks of the community, and with systematic aerial retention of the commercial RNC zone, with the core of it going to residential. This is what we attempted to implement with the future land use plan, I believe, and this was a second option, concept B, which called for 4 blocks core and several nodes of what the consultant called neighborhood commercial, neighborhood cultural, which I will just call it a commercial zone, with the neighborhood level commercial, again, on the borders, preserving residential core. So we understand now that there, and Dottie is definitely confirming it because she's shaking her head, that, that this is not exactly what the neighborhood envisioned. So what we want to do is to get a clear direction at this point so that we can complete the process, because by law, the future land use takes precedent over the zoning, but we want to make what changes, again, that will fit with the vision the neighborhood stakeholders have for the area. And then ultimately, we do have to make the zoning match with the future land use. So I think everybody's probably familiar with the boundaries. The blue map represents the neighborhood's boundaries. The map next to it shows the current zoning for the neighborhood. The map next to that shows the current future land use for the neighborhood. The yellow is residential, the red is commercial, the orange, and I welcome you to come up, because please come up. We have seats. You may bring a chair, because we want to make this very informal. We'll squeeze over. And very similar for the zoning map. The orange would be the RNC. The medium red is C1, I believe, and the very deep red, I believe, is a C2. So as you can see, the entire neighborhood currently is zoned commercial. The entirety of the neighborhood. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Brandy Dees, and she's going to talk to you about what the zone entails. And again, what we would like to come away with is what would you like to have?
Thank you, Helen. So basically what I'd like to do is just have an informal discussion on the type of uses that we would like to see. And I've given you a printout of the different uses that could be considered. You've got medium density, RNC, and then maybe even high density. We've heard, and had a lot of calls on potential development for where the medium density really didn't fit, whether it was setbacks, whether it was lot width, whether it was square footage or units per acre. So we really just want to have a discussion and figure out which direction the neighborhood wants to go in. And if there's not options that the current zoning ordinance makes the neighborhood happy, we can certainly possibly even, tailor one to meet the needs. So, of course, with medium density residential, the couple of more recent properties that are on the market, developers are looking at, they have that medium density residential, and again, the density is one of the issues. So, medium density residential provides primarily for single family, duplex, attached townhomes, and then there are a few other, as you can see on the front page, a few other light uses. Your residential neighborhood commercial is exactly that. You've got the residential, but then also you have retail, food and drug stores, personal service shops, specialty shops, banks, bakeries, floral shops, health, martial arts, laundromats, and restaurants, so on and so forth. And then the high density residential land use, which would have much different setbacks, give you a different feel as you're driving through. So if we could just get kind of some initial feedback on, based on what Ms. Gibson told you as far as the plan, where we are, and where do we want to be. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to have some clarification. The plan that we all have been working on and the one that's on file online as well as with the state has a future land use map that was adopted in 2004 that I do not see represented here at all. It was the one that HHI put together as the final plan for future land use. We had A, B, and C, and then they took those comments and came up with this final plan. And this is what we've been using, so I'm curious as to why we're not using that as the basis.
That would
Because-
be.
I apologize that those maps, I did not print every map from the plan, and I should have printed, this is the
Yeah,
one that I.
because this is the guiding one.
And I
Those
will-
were concepts that were discussed, but this is the one that was approved, and that is what we operate
And
from.
this is the one that still
I'm sorry?
and is this the one that the association or the neighborhood wants to go with?
This is the one that we have been using as our discussion point.
Okay.
And that was why we asked for the planning board to review it, because some people felt like this map did not incorporate enough of this B, A, or C concepts as they thought. But this is the one that was adopted and is currently on file as the approved. So this is kind of the starting point, and that's kind of the reference of how we got there, I believe.
Okay.
So it doesn't make sense to reference something that was never approved in my book.
Well, I can make some copies and distribute while Brandy is talking about that.
Because that's where the apparent conflict, I believe, between those people who were part of the original discussion, the current people who believe this to be the future land use, and then the zoning interpretations, if you will, that have been allowed seems to happen. And you know, it wasn't until we saw the GSI overlays that we realized there was a difference in the zoning that was being interpreted and the future land use. And when the state says this is the current comprehensive plan and this is the future land use plan, then this is the document that we would have to change, I believe.
Grab a chair. Okay.
So let's talk about just some issues that have come across. Obviously, the uses and what uses the neighborhood wants to restrict and not see. I think RNC may open that up and scare some folks as to what could come. But we don't, again, we want to hear from you guys. The other issue is that it seems that medium density again has some issues as far as the lot width, the square footage, and the setbacks. So do we want to try and tailor, a district that has smaller setbacks but still limits the use? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, just to contribute to that, at the very least, when you look at medium density residential, you have R1 AA and R1A, and the minimum lot widths for R1 AA, I believe, is 40,
That's correct.
and the minimum lot widths for R1A is 30. I think R1A is probably the closest thing to the average lot widths in Belmont de Villiers. But I think Mr. Goodman could tell you that some of the lots throughout the neighborhood are even smaller than 30. So,
Well, and another issue, a lot of times when we have medium density residential set out for future land use, the choices are obviously R1 AA or R1A. R1A allows manufactured homes, and that a lot of times is something neighborhoods do not want. So the R1 AA normally is the go-to. So that's another thought. RNC allows manufactured homes, and the higher density do as well.
how are manufactured homes defined? Because I think Mr. Salas, I mean, you've done some
What?
Modular construction.
You're pointing to me when you talk about modular manufacturing.
Modular and manufactured are two different things.
Okay.
Manufactured housing is built to HUD standards. Modular is built to the building code. So two different. things.
Modular is anchored to secure 180-mile-an-hour winds. And
Forgive
meets
me,
the
I'm not
building.
an architect.
And
so-
the other is on wheels and can fold anywhere you want.